Hello there, everybody. I'm Dr. Johnson, Dr. J, as many people call me. My background is in human biology, and then doctorate is in chiropractic. And I spent a good portion of additional time training in a health center training program through what's called MaxLiving. And so we talk about the 5 essentials for the body to be healthy and well. One of them is nutrition. And so obviously what you put in your body matters. And so some of you like food, right? So this is a fun topic. And to be honest, with me personally, this was literally one of the hardest things to change. Several years ago was when my nutrition journey started. It was about the same time that my son was born. He was relatively young. You can see him in that picture there, which at the time I thought was hilarious, that he's having his remote. He's sitting on the couch. He's basically a little couch potato there. Got his little electronics, that's my cell phone, and then a can of some cherry Coke. So obvious nutrition, Father of the Year award right here, especially from a guy who's learning many aspects of health and wellness and training in nutrition, as well as chiropractic and many other things at that time. This was something that I thought was silly, and I realized that that was a time that I needed to make some changes. I began to realize, as in my own body and my own health at that time, there were a lot of things that were accumulating. As I began to look at my own family, I began to realize that a lot of the ways that we did things when it comes to food and lifestyle were really not going in the best direction. I was doing very poorly at personally taking care of my own food and nutrition. When I grew up, I didn't eat a lot of vegetables. I was very just picky. I didn't eat a lot of variety of anything, to be honest, and it really needed a lot of sugar or starches of sort to really be something that I would even eat. And so unfortunately I was very, very difficult to find foods for. And as an adult, you make your own choices. You make your decisions on what it is that you put in and what it is that you pay for and the choices that you make. And unfortunately, my bad habits had carried on and had continued, and I was really not doing well. And so my whole body, as I was beginning to learn, sitting in school for hours a day, I was getting very stagnant. And so I was getting a little bit heavier, but mostly my entire body profile was radically different. My fat percentage was way up. My energy was way down. I was exhausted all the time. I wasn't really doing a lot of motion. My nutrition was primarily cherry Coke and chicken fingers, and that was really what I did. And so what I realized when I was looking at my son, when I hold him, I realized that if I continue the direction that I'm going, it's just not gonna go well. That I was going to go down the path that the rest of people in my family were going down, and the rest that our culture, our society, goes down the path of slowly developing chronic illness simply related to a lot of our choices in lifestyle. And so one of the things that I really was blessed with is a reality in the understanding that things can be different, but I had to take ownership of it and make it different. And that was basically when I was introduced to what's called MaxLiving now. And there are these 5 essentials that the body needs to be truly well. And so it's kind of like a plant. When you look at a plant and you understand what a plant needs, that it needs water, right? That's pretty self-explanatory. Different plants need varying levels of that, but they all need water. They all need soil. That's where they get their nutrients. They need sunlight. And if they're missing any of those things, or if there's poison or toxins that are in there that it's exposed to, that those are all naturally understood things that are going to be harmful for that plant. Now, the human body is infinitely more complex than a plant, right? But there are some simple principles that are always going to apply. When you take a look at what these are, it all boils down to these 5 things. Number 1 is the core of chiropractic, and that's birthed out of a simple principle that the body is made to heal itself, and understanding that ultimately the brain is what controls all the functioning and all the healing in every human body. And so we all know that. We know the brain controls things, but what we don't typically think about is that that is literally wired. So that is the electrical impulses, that is literally the electricity that powers and communicates to the rest of your body. Whether you believe in chiropractic or not, your nervous system runs things, right? And so we understand that one. And then one of the beauties of chiropractic is really simply removing interferences and allowing the body to heal itself, that an adjustment doesn't heal anyone. Now, you may hear a variety of stories related to things like that, whereas, hey, I got adjusted and my sinuses cleared up, or I got adjusted and my menstrual cycle started getting normalized, or I got adjusted and my acid reflux went away. And those are wonderful and awesome things and testimonies that I've seen many, many times over, but it's not the adjustment that heals you. It's simply removing the barriers. It's removing the interference there, and as I move the bone, God does the healing. It's just how your body is made to heal itself. And so that's the principle of chiropractic. It's not that I heal you. It's that I move the bones, removing the barriers, remove the roadblocks so that the body can heal on its own completely as it was designed to do anyways. And so understanding the body is made to be healthy, we just need to make sure that we do our part to take care of the body so that it can. The second essential is nutrition. That ultimately you are what you eat, but you're also what you absorb, digest, and utilize well. But you got to make sure that you're putting in good quality stuff. The next one is mindset. And obviously your mindset determines completely what it is that you do. So we'll talk about that, because your mindset can hold you back like it did for a lot of years with my own nutrition. Oxygen and muscle. Getting exercise, all of that is also essential. If you're not moving, you're not oxygenating the body, then your entire neurochemical profile is radically off. Your biology and your metabolism is radically off. Your circulation is going to be off. And how many of your cells need oxygen? All of them. So it's important. And then minimizing toxins. And that's a hard one because there are so many chemicals that are in food and that are in personal care products and that are in things that we use commonly every day in America. And so many of those things are known carcinogens, known endocrine disruptors, and are known toxins. And so if your body has these toxins that you're absorbing, then it will interfere with the functions of your body. And so how much of this makes sense? I mean, ultimately, I don't think that I've really, once I've explained these things to anyone, that somebody's like, well, I don't know that that really makes sense, or I don't really agree with that. These are just foundational principles that the body works on. And if you apply these things, health is radically, radically different. So now it's time for a little nutrition self-check. So is nutrition really important to you? And that's certainly something we all want to ask ourselves, is this important to me enough? And if you have a big enough reason why, you can overcome the how. You can work through the challenges that hold you back. And just a little bit of a checkpoint in what you value. So for example, asking yourself, what's more important to me? Is it in the moment what the flavor is and the pleasure of the food is your main priority? Or on the other side of the coin, on the other extreme, if you're looking for the most dense nutrients you can possibly fit into a single meal to nourish the performance machine that is your body. You see how radically different those pursuits would be. You're going to end up doing very, very different things if your mindset about it is completely different. So asking yourself, hey, how important is nutrition to you? And another barometer that you can use, another measuring stick, is essentially looking at your finances. So all you need to do is look at your checkbook, or look at your credit card statement, your bank statement. You can begin to see what in your life is actually important to you. So how much time, energy, money do you spend on things that you value? And so do you value food? If you spend a little bit more on the higher quality nutrient dense foods versus the absolute cheapest possible thing that will fill your stomach, radically different. So do you put thought into your shopping? Are you intentional about making a list and planning what you're making throughout the week and making sure that you get good quality foods and good quality ingredients? Are you looking at the labels? Are you checking these things on what you buy? Do you budget extra money to put towards the grass-fed beef or the free-range chicken? Or are you choosing to go organic on some of the produce to minimize the amount of chemicals and sprays that are on them and then get absorbed into them? So all of these little things make a massive difference in the health outcomes because they physically get into your body. And so you will pay for your health one way or the other. That's just a given. So it's better to pay for it along the way rather than paying for it in the health crisis. So the reality is that eating healthy and eating well is not only inexpensive, it's also the only option for being well throughout life. You'll ultimately pay for it one way or the other. Would you rather, and here's kind of the self-global question, would you rather pay for healthier ingredients now, or would you rather pay for it in the cost of health problems later, or in the suffering that you have to endure? So let's break through some of these mental barriers that hold us back from being able to do the things that are actually going to make the good changes in our lives. A lot of times we have conflicting information, or if we have misinformation, or simply on the inside we just don't want to feel deprived, like we're missing out on something. And typically we'll focus on short-lived goals versus personal internal values, value system versus the just trying to get to a particular spot one time. It's like losing 10 pounds and then going back to your old ways because it doesn't change your values or belief systems. But if your belief systems are different, then you ultimately pursue a longer term version of the good things. The budget concerns, the it costs too much mentality, already talked about that. And then just unsustainable diets. Some plans are just insane to try and keep up with. So I want to make it as easy and doable for you as possible. And then oftentimes we have previous failures. We have things that we tried to do it before and it just didn't quite work. So what do? Well, it comes back down to reprogramming your software. So your mindset, your subconscious mind programming will radically determine what it is that you do on a regular basis. That's where your habits are built from when you start looking at these things. So when we look at it, we want to make sure that we understand how to get into good changes in our life. So much of the information we have out there is conflicting, or we're misinformed when we're looking at books, television shows, magazines, programs, various schools of thought. Do I eat low fat? Do I eat low carb? Do I do juice cleanses? Do I do Weight Watchers? And that's where MaxLiving really comes in and helps with the practical step-by-step plans and programs that helps to ensure your success, which we'll talk about later on. But the feeling deprived concept, that really comes back to the dieting mentality. The reality is that everybody loves their cakes, their cookies, their french fries, and that's why it's so important to get your mindset right. You have to know your big why and why it's so important to eat well to fuel your high performance engine in your body. And then if you look at your short-lived goals, your intention, like I said, may just be to lose 10 pounds. Well, guess what? When you lose your 10 pounds, what now? What do you do? Can you shift gears into the next layer, or do you fall right back into your old ways because you haven't changed your meaningful values and habits? Back to budget concerns. I mean, everybody thinks that good food will cost way too much, but there's so many ways that you can utilize strategies to save money and have good quality and fit it into your budget. It ultimately just comes back down to valuing your health and investing in yourself and into your health and your body. The unsustainable diet conversation, most diets really are not over time. The counting calories is a great example of how horrible that sustained diet can be, because if you're focused primarily on calories in, calories out, and you're restricting the amount, you're going to end up deprived, you're going to feel hungry, you're going to feel frustrated, and even if you lose weight short term, your body will adapt. And it will absolutely sabotage the changes that you're trying to make, because your body needs nutrients. Caloric intake, or your calories, absolutely provide the energy that you need to function in life. It's more about the quality of your calories than it is simply the amount of them. So focusing radically different on, I mean, the reality is most people are amazed at how much they can eat and how great it can taste, and how satisfied they can feel, and how much their health can turn around when you do it the right way. With past failures, failing with diet and nutrition really, really messes with your mind. It helps you to start believing that your body is different, that you just can't do it, that it's broken or it's weak, or you're genetically programmed for problems. And the reality is that you absolutely can change. And once you believe that you can, once you have a little bit of sight and hope for the future, then everything's radically different. Recognize that right now is different, that today is different. Today is not yesterday, and it does not have to continue to be that way. You can wipe the slate clean, just follow the plan. Listen, you're not alone. You're not the first person who's struggled. You're not the only person who's had a hard time before. It's okay. It's okay. This program is unlike anything else that's out there, and you truly can be successful. You just need to get started and to take the next steps. The three main dangers that we get sucked into, primarily whenever we're focusing on calories in, calories out, or we're focusing on other strategies and getting confused by this name diet, that name diet, the whatever beach, the wine diet, the beer diet, the whatever diet that we've tried once upon a time, get simple with it, right? Keep it simple. If you heard the KISS principle, how about keep it short and simple? Sounds a little nicer than some of the other versions, but too much sugar, right? And so a lot of times people will say things like, hey doc, I don't eat sugar. Well, I mean, that's awesome. Now let's take a look at the labels of what you're actually eating. Because the reality is most people eat way more sugar or way more starch or things that break right down into sugar than what we realize. And one of the problems is that sugar is hidden in just about every single thing that you find in the grocery store. So especially around the center aisle, when everything that's in a box or everything in a bag, almost all of them have added sugars in addition to the sugars that would naturally be there in foods. And keep in mind, sugars that are naturally there in foods are still, you guessed it, sugar. The next thing we need to pay attention to is too many toxins, whether that be in the pesticides sprayed on the produce, or whether that be in the preservatives, the additives, the colors, or the artificial things in the food, sweeteners, artificial whatever. If you can't pronounce it, don't eat it, because ultimately those toxins get stored in, you guessed it, your fat cells. So you don't want to have too many toxins intake, because you will literally store more and will cause more obesity and cause more fatigue and cause more dysfunction and cause more cancers and all of those things, simply because toxins do not do well in the body. The third thing is not enough good fats. The reality is that over many, many years and many decades, we've been told that eating fat causes you to get fat, and nothing could be further from the truth. Your body is way more complex than simply you put it in and you put it on. You know, there's so many more things happening. You've got 70 to 100 trillion cells, all things happening, 100,000 chemical reactions in each one. Your body coordinates the growth and development and change of every one of those things every second of your entire life. The body is amazing. Think about it for a second. If your body did not have a need for fat, there would not be fat in foods. And if your body did not need fat, then why in the world is the majority of your brain made out of fat? Or why are there hormones made out of cholesterol? Why does your body even make cholesterol if cholesterol was such an evil entity? Well, the reality is that it's not. And research is constantly proving how horrifically wrong the science of the day was. That eating fat does not cause you to get fat, and eating fat does not raise your cholesterol levels. Now, hydrogenated processed fats can cause inflammation and raise things, but naturally occurring fats, even fats in meats, are not necessarily going to do that. And then the other thing is that cholesterol does not cause heart disease. I'll say that one again. High cholesterol does not cause heart disease. Now, if your cholesterol's up, you want to find out why. But the reality is that that is not a causative factor in heart problems. It's the inflammation that the cholesterol is part of the healing response and rebuilding cellular response for that actually relates. So it's kind of like a stoplight analogy. Well, if in a particular accident you find that, hey, there was a stoplight there. And then you start investigating all these accidents, and all of a sudden there are these traffic lights at every one of these intersections or every one of these accidents that you run into, and you start thinking maybe these traffic lights are the cause of these problems. When in reality, that those are the things that help to prevent a massive amount of actual accidents. Well, it's the same way with cholesterol. That cholesterol's there when you find inflammation and heart problems. That does not necessarily mean it's the cause. In fact, there are several biological mechanisms that associate cholesterol's function with being part of the healing process. So it's not a cause, even though it's there. So in summary, 3 major dangers. We tend to eat too much sugar, we tend to eat way too many toxins, and we tend not to have nearly enough good, healthy fats. So you may be thinking, that's great, Doc. Now you're telling me what, but I really don't understand why. Like, why the sugar? Why the toxins? Why the fats? What does that do? Well, it really comes back down to inflammation. And inflammation is really caused from a dietary standpoint from those 3 things. So, for example, sugar raises inflammation. The more sugar you have in your bloodstream, which is one of the reasons that diabetes is such a destructive problem, is because of the amount of inflammation and functional acid that is created by having that in your blood. And that's one of the reasons why insulin, the hormone that your body makes, is to bring that into the cells to get it out of circulation. So insulin goes up, brings glucose into the cells, brings your sugar into the cells to protect the rest of your body from the potential erosion of the acid, the inflammation that causes a physical irritation to tissue. Now, inflammation by nature is part of healing. The problem is when it gets out of balance. It'd be like you sitting on one end of a teeter-totter, and the other end, you drop an elephant on it. That's out of balance. That's not going to go well. And the problem is most people in America are way out of balance in their inflammation. And so you drop an elephant on the amount of inflammation that you have, you're going to get serious problems. And that's at the heart of virtually every wellness or Western illness that we deal with. So too much sugar raises inflammation, causes an acid-like effect where it erodes parts of your body, whether that be in your arteries, that can cause scarring, inflammation, raise blood pressure, all kinds of nasty things there, and wherever else that inflammation goes. Now, inflammation can be caused from damaged fats. So what happened whenever we decided that fats were evil and to not eat them anymore, which is still a strange concept that we could rationalize to the point that we've been eating these things forever and now all of a sudden they're evil. Anyways, the damaged fats are the things, the vegetable oils and all of that we've created a much higher processing of, can create more inflammation as well. So the canola oil, your vegetable oil, those kind of things can radically raise the amount of inflammation as well itself, which is why like fried foods and things like that are essentially going to add to inflammation to be a problem. In that respect, those kind of fats are a problem. And you do want to bring those down. You don't want to increase the amount of those kind of fats that you have going on. But healthy fats, natural fats, things that come from actual life, rather than things like vegetable oil, or unfortunately not really from vegetables. Most of it's from corn, which is actually not a vegetable. It was surprising because that was about the only vegetable that I ate whenever I was a child. Come to find out, it's not even a vegetable. It's a grain, and it's basically sugar, which is why so much corn syrup is used to sweeten things. So, is what it is. The next thing really is the toxins also raise inflammation. And that really comes back down to the creation. When you put all these things together, the amount of inflammation that can happen from these things increases blood pressure, increases because of the pressure going up, it literally occludes or closes down on the arteries because the muscle tissue of the arteries contracts, swells up, and then closes down the hole or the hose that blood flows through. So that raises blood pressure, causes a lot harder work to be required out of your heart, and can ultimately lead to organ failure, even in neurogenic inflammation due to problems in the spine, can cause that nerve ending inflammation, whether that be nerve ending into your sinuses, nerve ending into your stomach, nerve ending into your digestive system, that can cause a neurogenic inflammation into that organ structure, and then it simply can't function well, which is why the core of chiropractic is such a missing element in healthcare as well. Let's get back to the calorie counting for just a second. Let's take a look at this one. When you look at the myth that counting calories is an effective way for healthy nutrition, consider this. 150 calories of almonds, raw almonds, nuts, as compared to 150 calories of a Twinkie. Which one will your body run from better? Which one's going to nourish you better? Which one's going to have more energy? Which one is going to be easier to burn the fats off of? Well, the almonds are going to be way, way better for you. They're going to be anti-inflammatory, loaded with all kinds of nutrients, healthy fats, some aspects of protein, going to have some magnesium, which helps muscles relax and blood pressure to go down because of that muscular swelling relaxation that it creates as a benefit. It's so radically different. So your caloric intake takes a huge backseat to the quality of the food that you eat. So weight loss is not just a game of calories in, calories out. It's not as simple as that. The quality is the key. So obviously, eating 22 almonds is going to build your brain, decrease inflammation, among other things, while eating a Twinkie is going to increase inflammation, raise your blood sugar, and create a whole host of problems for your future. So I've talked about avoiding sugar, but here's the next question. Is there anything worse than sugar? And yeah, honestly, the artificial sweeteners, whether that be Splenda, whether that be aspartame, those guys are going to be much, much worse on the body than actual even sugar. So diet beverages, diet soda, diet sweeteners, things like that are going to be horrifically inflammatory, nasty on your body. And many studies will show that it actually doesn't even help with weight loss. Because think of it, it's a toxin. If these chemicals are not naturally occurring, your body does not have the same mechanisms in order to process and eliminate them the same way. So they build up. And guess where toxins are built up? Again, in your fat tissue. Plus, there's that false sense of it's okay, so you're likely to consume more volume. And that just creates a mess because most diet drinks are loaded with all kinds of other nasty, nasty toxins. But just think of it this way. The rationalization of Splenda is that it's made from sugar, therefore it's like sugar, which at this point you ought to have a pretty good idea that sugar is not going to be a good idea. You don't want to mimic that thing anyways. But here's the reality. The mentality of A plus B equals C does not apply when you look at A plus B plus XYZ plus PDQ. It's no longer going to equal C. So the idea that it's made from sugar so it tastes like sugar, strictly speaking, is technically true. However, by the time a single sucrose molecule, or the blend of glucose, is transformed into Splenda, it becomes something completely different. For that matter, I want you to Google the chemical name for Splenda. Try it and literally try and read that thing. It's like 1,3-dimethyl hexafluora, and it just goes on for days. That's not sugar anymore, and it's not food anymore. And there are serious side effects. There are serious concerns about what happens between gastrointestinal problems. There have been associated seizures, dizziness, migraines, blurred vision, allergic reactions, blood sugar increases, believe it or not, and weight gain, as well as a carcinogenic potential when cooking with it, according to the Journal of Toxicology and Environmental Health. Research found that this Splenda could kill as much as 50% of your intestinal microbiome. Your probiotics can actually be significantly damaged, and that's going to influence your immune system, all these other things tied back to this. So just don't go the artificials route. Just don't do it. So then what do you do? If it's not sugar, if it's not artificials, if sugar's so bad, what do you use as some kind of sweetener, because man, I got to have some kind of sweet flavor in my life, right? Well, here's what you want to do. Things like stevia. Stevia is from a plant leaf. So here's a good analogy for you. If something comes from a plant, it's probably some level of a food, right? If something is made in a plant, probably not. So things like stevia comes from the plant leaf. It's actually called sweet leaf, as it's known as, and it's about 300 times to 400 times sweeter than sugar per volume. And so some other things that can be very helpful are naturally occurring sugar alcohols, because they don't affect blood sugar the same way. They just process through your liver. So things like erythritol, things like xylitol, those are very helpful for building a well-rounded flavor profile of sweetness in things as you bake. So for example, if you're making muffins utilizing almond flour, using a little erythritol, maybe a brand like Swerve is a good one, and then some stevia, and you begin to blend those together, and you bake it and you let it set for a little while so that the sweetness kind of mixes in. The one caveat there is to be careful with the digestive issues that can happen, because sugar alcohols can also be used for energy by certain bacteria in your gut. And so fueling good bacteria can be a very helpful thing, but that fermentation process can create a little bit of gas. So that can create a bit of a digestive disturbance, especially if your intestinal microbiome is a little bit off. If it's not quite where it should be, you may be more sensitive to these things depending on the individual microbes that you have. So a little bit, usually fine, just test it and see how your individual body goes. And with a little bit of a probiotic, you tend to be able to build your gut into a better position. You can handle these things a little bit better. But stevia doesn't by itself. It's just with the erythritol, xylitol may have a little bit of digestive issue. But these naturally occurring things do not add to inflammation like the sugars or the artificial sweeteners and things like that. Now, keep in mind that things like honey, dates, maple syrup, natural sugars still raise your blood sugar. Even though they're from natural sources, if they still have sugar content, they still have sugar content. So one of the myths I mentioned earlier is that fat makes you fat. And that mentality has permeated through our culture for a long time. But here's the truth, okay? Healthy fat is essential, okay? Have you ever heard of essential fatty acids? That means that your body is required to consume them. It cannot make them. Okay, so fat doesn't make you fat. Bad fats, sugar, and your body's inability to burn fat, those things will make you fat. So, for example, the low-fat diet and just is one of the biggest travesties in our culture. It's one of the biggest permeated lies that have caused such massive harm to the health of people, and has honestly been a big killer in our society by its aggregate health effects in obesity and inflammation and heart disease and all of these things. Because when we rob our bodies of fats, we miss all of the different things that fat does. And guess what's added to everything that's in low fat mindset? Extra sugar. So it doesn't make any sense. It's completely backwards from the type of nutrient and macronutrient profile that we're looking for healthy longevity. It's just completely the wrong direction. It's literally upside down. If you take the food pyramid, flip it upside down, you do much, much better. So, contrary to popular belief, fat is actually very, very good for you and necessary. It's the number one missing nutrient. Fats literally help to build cell membranes. If you think about it, if you go back to biology, there was the phospholipid bilayer surrounding your cells. And that lipid means fat. So if you're checking your fats in your profile, your doctor's going to order things like a lipid profile to look at your fats, your LDL, VLDL, HDL, all those things. It's your fat profile in your blood. But that lipid bilayer is literally the cell wall contents. So you want to make sure that the fats that you consume are good. You don't want the fried foods and the nasty and the trans fats that we know are toxic, but healthy fats are absolutely crucial for your body's ability to absorb nutrients into the cells and to detox. In particular, fats are required for certain vitamins absorption. So vitamins like vitamin A, vitamin D, which you hear so much about how important vitamin D is for your immune system, for health. Looking at it like it's actually more like a pro-hormone. There's so many functions that we're finding out that it has for the body. Most people are deficient in vitamin D, by the way, so you should have that tested, and you want your vitamin D levels to be up. And the current recommendations for the amount of vitamin D are atrociously low. Most people need anywhere between 5,000 to 10,000 IUs consumed daily to even keep our bodies blood levels in a good spot. So we just typically don't get enough of it in. It's one of those things that we absolutely need to supplement by and large, because we're just not outside enough to get the UV exposure, which by the way is not inherently evil either, but the UV exposure to convert the cholesterol in your skin, yes, I said cholesterol, into the appropriate natural form of vitamin D3. So make sure that you're paying attention to that. Test it, check on it, ask more questions if you need. Fats are also essential for cushioning our vital organs. There's something called brown fat, which actually helps regulate your body's temperature and helps trigger many fat burning, the white fat burning processes within. So protecting you from temperature, a physical cushion for vital organs, and regulates and makes up the building block of many hormones. Cholesterol, steroid hormones, hormones for reproductive cycle, for like guys for testosterone. Well, ladies have testosterone too, but there's an epidemic of lower testosterone in our society, and one of the reasons is we simply don't eat enough cholesterol in natural form. So things like steaks, things like the egg yolks, things like butter. We need to be having more and more and more of these things. Again, cholesterol in and of itself, dietary cholesterol, does not cause blood cholesterol to go up. The body's much more intelligent than that. It'll regulate it on its own as long as nothing's interfering with that process. And if it goes up, if cholesterol's up, it's for a reason. Just pay attention to that. And then one of the crazy things is that eating healthy fats actually reduces inflammation. It actually lowers your body's, balances your body's inflammation. Your omega-3 to omega-6 and 9 balance helps to massively keep the inflammation teeter-totter, like I used the analogy earlier, to keep that balanced properly. So your omega-3s are highly anti-inflammatory, which means it's like a fire extinguisher to your body. And so many things add to inflammation in our life and lifestyle now. We just got to make sure that we're getting enough of the right kind of fats. It also allows for proper cellular detoxification through that cell phospholipid bilayer membrane. And the reality is that your brain tissue literally is 70% fat. And your brain runs on fats through fatty acids and ketones. Those are great nutrients for the brain. It just blew me away when I heard that a doctor told somebody that the only thing that the brain runs on is sugar. That's an absolute fallacy, just completely wrong and dangerous. Because if you're constantly thinking you need to eat sugar to fuel your brain, guess what you'll likely get? Diabetes or some other inflammation or health problems. Just a nasty recommendation. But there are certain fats that are actually helping of your body's ability to burn fat. So conjugated linoleic acid, CLA, is a fat burning mediator. And something super associated with brain function is something called arachidonic acid, not to be confused with arachnids. That's spiders. That's different. But arachidonic acid is integral for brain function. You can actually get some arachidonic acid out of butter. Just simple stuff. But man, fat does not make you fat. Fat is the most integral part of nutrition, and the vast majority of your diet can literally be fat. An interesting thing, if you look up all the different benefits of something called the ketogenic diet, and for many people it's the most ideal type of balance and ratio, that 75% of your calories literally can come from fat, and it's anti-inflammatory, reversal of diabetes, so many layers of those things. And so if you have any more specific questions of whether you would be one that would benefit from a diet like that, feel free to ask or come on in to the office. Okay, so we need fats. We need the right type of fats. So which ones are the right kinds? Which ones are the wrong kinds? Okay, so here we go. Bad fats are anything hydrogenated or anything partially hydrogenated. For example, cottonseed oil, soybean oil, vegetable oil, or anything with known trans fats on the label. So things like margarine. When we were told to quit eating butter and start having margarine, there's been massive amounts of increase in obesity and heart disease and all of that. Just again, margarine is not real food. It's not butter. It's not even remotely close to. I can't believe it's not butter. I can't believe it's not food. Okay, so those things are closer to plastic than they are to nutrient dense foods. So don't eat plastic. All right, don't eat margarine. Don't eat the synthetic butters. Don't eat that stuff. It's just nasty. The other thing to recognize is that there are a lot of vegetable oils that have been processed so much that they've just absolutely turned rancid. Things like corn oils, vegetable oils, or canola oil, and basically anything simply labeled vegetable oil, which is unfortunately found in virtually every bread, cracker, cookie, boxed food in existence. So canola oil, for example, how many of you have heard that canola is a good oil to cook with? I mean, almost everybody, we all have, you know. The reality is it's a genetically modified rapeseed oil, which is not a good oil. And again, the whole processing of that, you can look up videos of just how just nasty the process is of making that stuff. It'll gross you out if you actually watch it. You will not want to have any of that. If you actually look and see how that's made and you see all the different processes, you physically see it, it's like, oh man, nasty. No, do not want any of that in my body. In fact, the canola, one acronym that refers to a little bit of its history, is the Canadian oil low acids, the low uric acid content of the oil, but originally in Canada was used for a lubricant, so for various machines and machinery and things like that. And so it worked really well there, from what I understand. And then in America, guess what? It's marketed for us to eat. Not all motor or other kinds of machinery oils are fit for human consumption. Let me just throw that out there, okay? So another thing that we can do is literally lessons from the ant. If you put butter out on a plate and you put margarine out on a plate and you put an I can't believe it's not butter or some other version of something like that out on a plate, the ants literally will avoid the margarine. They just won't. They will eat the actual butter. So take a lesson from the ant. Eat the actual foods, okay? Now, let's talk a little bit about the good stuff, all right? So some extra virgin olive oil. Most people know that olive oil is going to be a good oil. Now, the one caveat with that one is to not burn it, okay? So if it starts to smoke, it can actually turn rancid, so you don't want to cook too high with olive oil. Avocado oil. Avocado oil is going to be really helpful. How many of you like avocados? Anybody? Yeah, so avocado is great. Guacamole, lots of good fats loaded in there. Coconut oil, even though it's a saturated fat, yes, not all saturated fats are bad. Saturated fats from coconut oil is one of the healthiest, most easily digested oil that you can possibly have. In fact, it does not even require bile from your liver and your gallbladder to emulsify, which means that if you don't have a gallbladder, coconut oil is your friend. It's so much easier. Raw nuts, raw seeds, and their oils are going to be much, much better. Real butter. Raw butter is best, especially from a grass-fed source. So a high-quality, healthy cow will actually have better butter. Raw cheeses, yogurts, again, full fat on these guys, and make sure that you're getting as close to original source as you can. So natural, the way that things used to be. Things that our grandparents used to eat. Things that they would have known as food. So if it didn't exist for your grandparents or great-grandparents' generation, it's not food. They would have never heard of things like Pop-Tarts. Just throwing that out there. Though, sorry, that would have made me really sad whenever I was about 10. To find out that those are not actual food, don't do anything for me. But grass-fed meats, things like actual steak and actual beef can be incredibly nourishing. In fact, the omega-3 to 6 ratio in a grass-fed steak is actually the ideal ratio for your body. So crazy, having steak can be incredibly healthy for you. Just get a good one. Rather than the conventional grain-fed can be highly inflammatory. So it really does make a massive difference when you get good quality meats versus your more like your processed food, fast food type of meats. Eggs can be great. So have the yolk, have the meats in there, have the cholesterol in there, not the meats in the yolk. The fats that are in there can be incredibly nourishing, can be anti-inflammatory. Again, though, eggs ideally would be free range, which means the chickens are able to run around and do their exercise and eat their natural diet. They're going to have a better profile of eggs. So just think about it. The closer to the 5 essentials lifestyle version of that for a chicken, the better, right? They're going to have a healthier body, healthier meats, healthier eggs. Everything's going to go better for that MaxLiving chicken or that MaxLiving cow or whatever that is. When it comes to dairy, the whole milk or the full fat organic is hugely a minimum when it comes to dairy products. The reality is that there's so much processing and so many industrialized layers of things that happen in that world that for many people it's better just to go almond milk, coconut milk, things like that, and not even go dairy at all. Because so many people develop sensitivities due to artificial stimulation of the immune system with various egg or dairy products or whatever else that's in many things that are considered healthy that we get told to put in. When it comes to fish, so fatty fish, definitely go with the fattier fish. Pacific or wild caught salmon is a great example. Small fish, things like sardines, are going to be very, very healthful. Now, here's the thing. You want to go wild and you don't want to go farm raised. Reason being, there's more disbursement of the chemical toxins and the bioaccumulation of the nasty stuff whenever you have a larger body of water. It's just a simple question of ratios. So you have a much less layer of toxicity there. But wait, Doc, don't fats and meats cause heart disease, cancer, osteoporosis, kidney disease? Well, short answer is no. Meat-eating societies have lived free of heart disease and cancer for centuries, where saturated fat is actually very important at the cellular level. It doesn't cause heart disease, and it actually helps to prevent it. So saturated fat benefits are things like the cell membrane function I talked about, preferred fuel for your heart, actually. It's an effective anti-cavity, anti-plaque, and antifungal agent. It's literally antimicrobial, healthful whenever you have these things. It prevents the oxidation of cholesterol, which is more the free radical damage. The oxidation, the free radical, antioxidant, that whole conversation is actually very helpful whenever you have saturated fats from a natural, healthy source. And that can be found in naturally raised meats. So not only not a problem, but can actually be extremely helpful. There is, however, a problem with most of the conventional meats, and here's where you want to make sure that you're paying attention to the quality of it, and here's where you may need to budget just a little bit more. Number one is the toxic bioaccumulation. I alluded to that earlier, but what that essentially means is that the higher in the food chain, the more accumulation of toxins that will happen. So, for example, the environmental release of toxic substances, low concentrations found in soils and plants. Herbivores must eat 10 grams of living plants to make 1 gram of itself. Carnivores will accumulate toxins 10 times greater than the herbivores, which means functionally 100 times more toxic than soil and plants. This comes from the Australian Academy of Science. So you can find that in science.org, and you can look that stuff up. Number two is the essential fatty acids. The best way to change your omega ratio isn't necessarily fish oils, although it's very, very helpful from a supplement standpoint, especially get a good quality, right? Quality is key. Honestly, one of the best ways to start that is simply to change the meats that you're eating. Go natural, get the organic, get the grass-fed. Because of the toxic bioaccumulation, it makes a massive difference. If you're going to go organic on anything, go with the meats and the animal products first. So the same principles apply to fish, whenever they're raised in overcrowded farms and fed toxic substances versus wild caught and chicken raised in cages with antibiotics to cage-free chickens. One of the problems there is going to be the genetically modified grain. So the GMO corn, for example, when it's genetically modified with a variety of adaptations that make them live longer and survive longer, one of which is actually an insecticide. So, for example, if you have a insecticide or pesticide growing inside this food-ish thing, and then that gets inside an animal, then that animal ends up not dealing with it well, and it ends up getting sick, and that's also going to affect their bacterial profile of the inside of their gut, and which consequently can do the same thing in a person's gut and make a really significant problem there. And not only that, but the toxic bioaccumulation effects as well. So whenever there's more and more and more grains consumed in like cows, for example, more and more and more of that, or even corn fed in farm-raised fish, same concept. And then recognize too that grains equal sugar. That's what they break down into. They just turn right into sugar. It's just sometimes more complex sugar, but it's still straight up sugar. And just like grain feeding causes cattle to get fatter, it does the same thing to people. Recognize too that they don't survive well. They don't live well. They get sick. And when they get sick, guess what they end up being treated with? And they get infections. Is more antibiotics. The vast majority of antibiotics in our country are utilized by animals, which is just outlandish when you look at it that way. So cows are designed to eat grass, okay? So if they do that, they will look very differently. They will take a little bit longer to get to market, so they cost a little bit more to produce and to farm and to do that. But recognize the value of the profile of the chemistry that you're consuming. By the way, the taste is something you'll want to experience. Just to recap, change the animal products first. Grass-fed beef, free-range chickens, wild-caught fish, and a natural source for dairy products. A great way to do that is simply with the high quality whey protein that MaxLiving has that helps to restore blood sugar. It's also a rich source of the amino acids that make up the building blocks of glutathione, which is your most important molecule in order to be able to detoxify, which fundamentally helps you to stay healthy, prevent aging, helps to prevent things like cancer, heart disease, dementia, and all kinds of things in between. It also, so through that method, it encourages detoxification. It helps to boost the immune system with the components that are in there, and your body's defense against inflammation and free radicals, which is huge. Always choose a non-denatured protein from grass-fed Here's another myth that we really need to make sure that we get clear and understand. This myth is that you need 5 to 8 servings of grains every day for a healthy diet. When in reality, your body can get all of the carbohydrates it needs from vegetables. And most Americans are eating highly processed, hybridized, and refined grains. Historically, the kind of wheat that we ate, especially when you look at things like in the Old Testament, you look at the Ezekiel recipe, that Ezekiel bread, for example, is made from. They took the recipe right out of the Old Testament book in the Bible. For example, the ancient version of wheat, the einkorn type of wheat, is about 4 feet tall. Okay, very hardy. It's actually much higher in protein than the modern wheat. It has one of the big myths that we need to make sure that we bust is that the FDA and the USDA effectively protect the general public from dangerous products. Here's a thought that everything that has been recalled by the FDA was once proven safe and effective by the same organization. So when you think about it, everything that's been recalled, and we see lots and lots of things being pulled off the market over time from the medication standpoint, from the drugs that when over many, many years and studies, they begin to recognize, hey, these things are killing people. We need to get this off the market. That often that takes a long time, and the casualty list is huge by the time that they do that. When unfortunately the system favors large companies that can push items through just because of the volume of finances, that they can rush the process much more quickly, and then we get things out into the market, and just the level of complexity of modern chemistry when it comes to the industry side of food or medications just is incredibly complex and is highly difficult, if not impossible, to predict what as we dig in further, these toxic foods that we end up consuming, we start looking at these frankenfood concepts. So when we start putting genes from one particular species into genes of another particular species, it starts getting very complex, starts getting very challenging to predict negative effects, and most negative effects are simply not studied. So we really have no solid data, but there's a lot of anecdotal warnings on these things, and I would encourage you to look those up, to dig deeper, to find out for yourself and make your own decisions about what you want to do. But my recommendation from what I've read and what I've looked into is to avoid anything that's been genetically modified. In short, anything that God didn't make, try and avoid it. I think that's pretty simple. So let me break down the two core plans, or one core and one advanced plan for nutrition that Maximize Living foundationally recommends. And so when you look at nutrition for your family, the core plan is really what we're talking about. This is health maintenance, disease prevention, moderate weight loss, usually just a little bit and slowly if you have a little bit to lose. But the advanced plan is really when you want to make some changes in your life. And this is for hormone repair, for weight loss resistance, for inflammation and disease management. So the core plan is basically all of the things that I've been talking about getting foods more natural and getting them in a clean sourcing and doing the best that you can. Now, the advanced plan is a little bit different because it's a little bit restrictive, especially on the front end, because we've got to repair a lot of the metabolic damage that is oh so common in America. In fact, between a third and two-thirds, somewhere in that region, would be my guesstimate for how many people have some metabolic systemic damage to where their metabolic system does not function correctly. Now, you may need some specific nutrients, and there's some metabolic testing that you can request, and we can walk you through what that looks like and how you can find out the details. But in a foundational principle, the advanced plan is very, very helpful at kickstarting those changes. So number one is looking at the sugar and the carbohydrates, where we really just need to eliminate sugars, right? And one of the challenges there is that, man, sugar tastes good. It can be addictive, and it can be so entwined in everything that we do. But if we eliminate sugar, then it can radically alter our hormone profile, our energy profile, and all those other latest things. We just need to get the toxic stuff out. And then the hidden sugars too, pay attention to that. We also need to eliminate grains, because ultimately grains break down right into, you guessed it, sugar. Now, the other thing that's a little bit surprising for many people is that we need to limit fruit on the advanced plan. And eliminating fruit also helps us And in the next episode, in part 2, what we're going to be doing is looking at the shopping. We're going to be looking at labels. We're going to be looking at how do we know what we're actually getting. And we'll look at some food translation. So